The council chamber stretched 300 meters across, built from crystal that caught starlight and turned it into dancing colors on the walls. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated seats, arranged in circles that rose toward the domed ceiling. At the center stood Ambassador Thelsera of the Valorn, her tall frame draped in the blue robes of the council speaker. Her four eyes moved constantly, watching the chaos unfold before her. "The Vrax have taken the Kelton system," announced Commander Vrix, his reptilian scales clicking together as he moved. "That makes 17 systems in the last 2 months. Their advance shows no signs of slowing." A wave of fear rippled through the chamber. Species that had never agreed on anything suddenly shared the same expression of dread. The Vrax Dominion had appeared 3 years ago from beyond the galactic rim, and since then, they had crushed every military force sent against them. Their ships moved faster, hit harder, and seemed immune to every weapon the Council possessed. "We need to consolidate our forces," suggested Ambassador Krell of the Manthari, his insect-like mandibles clicking nervously. "Pull back to the core worlds. Establish a defensive perimeter we can actually hold." "Pull back?" Thelsara's voice carried across the chamber, sharp as broken glass. "We have already abandoned 40 systems. How many more worlds must we sacrifice? How many billions of lives?" Commander Vrix brought up a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. Red markers showed Vrax positions spreading like an infection across the star map. Blue markers represented Council forces, scattered and retreating. "Our ships cannot penetrate their armor," he explained. "They have some kind of adaptive shielding. Energy weapons are absorbed and dispersed. Missiles are intercepted before impact. We damage them, but never enough." "What about the new plasma cannons the Dreth developed?" asked someone from the upper tiers. "Tested last week at Horven Station," Vrix replied, his tone flat. "The Vrax adapted to them within 4 hours. Then they destroyed the station and everything in orbit." Silence fell across the chamber. It was the silence of defeat, of people who had run out of ideas and were waiting for someone else to provide an answer that didn't exist. Ambassador Chen of Earth stood up slowly. She was small compared to most beings in the chamber, her gray hair tied back in a simple bun. Humans had only joined the Galactic Council 50 years ago, newcomers to a community that had existed for millennia. Most species still considered them primitives who had gotten lucky with faster-than-light travel. "The human delegation would like to offer assistance," Chen said, her voice calm and measured. Several representatives exchanged glances. A few even laughed quietly, trying to hide their amusement. "That is very kind, Ambassador Chen," Thelsera said, her tone polite but dismissive. "However, the Council has access to the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. I'm not sure what Earth could possibly contribute that we haven't already attempted." Chen didn't sit down. "We understand your position. But humanity has fought wars before. Long wars, desperate wars. We have experience that might prove valuable." Commander Vrix studied the human with his cold reptilian eyes. "Your fleet numbers less than 800 ships. The Vrax have destroyed fleets 10 times that size. Your weapons technology is centuries behind current standards. Your ships are slow, your shields are weak. And your weapons are—" He paused, searching for a diplomatic word. "Primitive." "Kinetic weapons and fusion drives," added Ambassador Krell, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. "The galaxy moved past such things 500 years ago. No offense intended, Ambassador, but your species is simply not equipped for this fight." Chen remained standing, her expression unchanged. "We have something else." "Something old." "Old?" Thelsera tilted her head, genuinely confused. "You wish to offer us ancient human technology? Technology even more primitive than what you currently use?" "Not technology," Chen corrected. "Experience. The kind that only comes from fighting wars where surrender means extinction. The kind where you use whatever works, whether it's elegant or not." The chamber filled with murmurs. Several delegates spoke to their aides, some checking data displays to confirm what they already knew about human military capabilities. The consensus was clear in their faces. Humanity had nothing to offer. "We appreciate the gesture," Thelsera said finally. "But the Council must focus on solutions that have a realistic chance of success. Perhaps Earth can assist with refugee management or medical supplies." Chen nodded slowly and sat down. She had expected this response. The Council saw only numbers and specifications, comparing weapons systems like merchants comparing goods at market. They had forgotten something important. something humans had learned in blood across centuries of warfare. Wars were not won by the side with the best technology. They were won by the side that refused to lose. As the session continued, Chen activated her private communicator. The message she sent was encrypted, directed to Earth's military command. It contained only 3 words: begin the reactivation. 13 light-years away, in orbit around Earth's moon, Admiral Sarah Chen received the message. She stood on the observation deck of the military headquarters, staring at the massive shape floating in the darkness beyond. The shipyard had been built around it decades ago, preserving it as a museum piece, a reminder of humanity's bloody past. The ship was 3 kilometers long, angular and brutal in design. Its hull was dark gray, covered in armor plating that made it look more like a fortress than a vessel. No smooth curves, no elegant lines, just hard angles and thousands of weapons ports. It had been designed during humanity's darkest era, when Mars and the asteroid colonies had rebelled, and Earth had built warships to break them. The Remembrance had earned its name during the Siege of Titan, where it had fired continuously for 76 hours straight, reducing a fortified moon to rubble while absorbing damage that would have destroyed any modern ship. It had survived because it was built with one principle: never stop fighting, no matter what. After the colonial wars ended, after Earth had reunited with its colonies through diplomacy instead of weapons, the Remembrance had been decommissioned. Too brutal for peacetime, too old for modern warfare, it became a museum, a place where school children could learn about the horrors their ancestors had inflicted on each other. Admiral Chen had visited it once as a young officer. She remembered walking through corridors designed for war, seeing weapon systems built for one purpose: overwhelming firepower delivered with absolute ruthlessness. She had left feeling sick, grateful that humanity had moved past such savagery. Now, looking at it through the observation window, she felt something different. Not pride exactly, but recognition. The galaxy had forgotten what real war looked like. The Council fought with elegant ships and advanced technology, expecting their superiority to guarantee victory. The Vracs had reminded them that war was never elegant. Her second-in-command, Captain Rodriguez, approached from behind. "Admiral, are you certain about this?" "The Council rejected our offer. We have no authorization to proceed." "We have authorization from Earth Command," Chen replied. "The Council doesn't need to know." "Not yet. The ship is 500 years old. Its systems are obsolete. Its weapons are primitive by modern standards." "Yes," Chen agreed. "That's exactly why it might work." She turned from the window and faced her captain. "Send the activation orders. Begin crew selection from volunteers who understand what this ship represents. And, Captain," she paused, "make sure they understand this is likely a one-way mission." Rodriguez saluted and left to carry out his orders. Admiral Chen turned back to the window, studying the ancient warship floating in the darkness. Somewhere in her family's history, an ancestor had fought in the colonial wars. She understood the weight of that legacy, the terrible cost of the victory that ship represented. The galaxy was about to learn something humanity had known for centuries. Sometimes the old ways weren't outdated. Sometimes they were just waiting for the right moment to be remembered. The shuttle approached the lunar shipyard slowly, giving its passengers their first real look at the Remembrance. Lieutenant Marcus Webb pressed his face against the window, trying to understand what he was seeing. The ship was massive, yes, but it was also wrong in ways that made his training scream warnings at him. No shield generators dotted its hull. No energy weapon ports glowed with ready power. Instead, thousands of rectangular hatches covered its surface, each one protecting a railgun barrel. The armor plating was thick, layered, primitive. This wasn't a ship designed to dodge attacks. It was designed to absorb them and keep fighting. "It looks like someone built a fortress and then taught it to fly," said Lieutenant Sarah Kim, sitting beside him. She was the navigation officer, young and brilliant, used to modern ships that could dance between stars. "That's exactly what they did," replied Commander James Torres from across the cabin. He was older, gray streaking his dark hair, and he had actually studied the colonial wars in depth. This ship wasn't built for speed or elegance. It was built to go somewhere, plant itself, and destroy everything in range. The shuttle docked in one of the Remembrance's hangar bays. The crew filed out, their boots clanging on metal floors that had been walked by warriors 5 centuries ago. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim red glow. The air smelled of preservatives and old machinery. Admiral Chen was waiting for them, standing beside something that looked like a holographic projector. "Welcome aboard," she said. "I know this isn't what you expected. This ship is old, outdated, and uses technology that most of you only read about in history classes. But it's what we have, and it's what the galaxy needs." "Permission to speak freely, Admiral?" asked Lieutenant Webb. Chen nodded. "Admiral, I've reviewed the specifications. This ship can't compete with modern vessels. No shields, no jump drive, weapons that fire solid metal instead of energy. The Vraks will tear us apart." "Maybe," Chen agreed, "but maybe not. Let me show you something." She activated the projector and a figure appeared. It looked human, wearing an old military uniform from centuries past, but its movements were slightly off, too smooth. An artificial intelligence then, but an old one. "This is REM," Chen explained, short for remembrance. "The ship's AI." The hologram turned to face them, studying each crew member with eyes that seemed too knowing. "Greetings," it said, its voice carrying a slight echo. "I have been dormant for 473 years, 2 months, and 16 days. It is good to be awakened." "REM," Chen said. "Show them Titan." The AI's expression changed, becoming somber. The hangar bay disappeared, replaced by a historical simulation. They were in space, watching a moon fortress bristling with weapons. Ships surrounded it, hundreds of them, all bearing the markings of the Martian colonies. Then the Remembrance appeared, moving into weapons range. The fortress opened fire, and so did every ship in orbit. Energy beams, missiles, kinetic rounds, everything the colonies could throw at one target. The Remembrance didn't dodge. It didn't even try. It simply kept moving forward as explosions covered its hull. Armor plating vaporized, sections decompressed, fires erupted across its surface. But the ship didn't stop, and more importantly, its guns didn't stop. The railguns fired in sequence, a continuous roar of metal death. Tungsten rounds moving at 3%. The speed of light smashed into the fortress. Shields collapsed. Armor failed. The fortress began to break apart. "How long?" whispered Lieutenant Kim. 76 hours, Rem answered. "We fired continuously for 76 hours. The fortress fell after 48. The remaining ships took longer. By the end, 63% of my hull was compromised. Life support had failed in 80% of compartments. 3,412 crew members died. The simulation ended, returning them to the hangar bay. No one spoke. They had all seen battle recordings before, but nothing like that. Modern warfare was quick, surgical. Ships traded volleys from a distance using shields and electronic countermeasures. What they had just witnessed was something else entirely. It was brutal, ugly, and terrifyingly effective. "The colonial wars were different," Chen said quietly. "Both sides knew that defeat meant extinction. Mars and the Belt wanted freedom at any cost. Earth couldn't allow the colonies to break away. So we built ships like this one. Ships that could take unimaginable punishment and keep fighting." She walked toward the hangar exit, gesturing for them to follow. "The galaxy has forgotten what that kind of war looks like. Their conflicts are limited, civilized even. The Vraks don't fight that way, and the Council doesn't know how to respond." They moved through corridors lined with armor plating. Everything was overbuilt, redundant. Multiple backup systems for every critical function. It was primitive compared to modern ships, but there was a logic to it that Webb was beginning to understand. "The Vraks adapt to energy weapons," Torres said, thinking out loud. "They have shields that learn and adjust. But railguns? Solid tungsten moving at relativistic speeds? There's nothing to adapt to. It's just mass and velocity." "Exactly," Chen confirmed. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one." They reached the bridge, a circular room dominated by manual control stations. No holographic displays, no neural interfaces. Just screens, keyboards, and physical switches. It looked like something from a museum, which Webb realized it had been. "We have 2 weeks to get this ship operational," Chen announced. 2 weeks to learn systems that your great-grandparents would have found outdated. Rem will help with training, but understand this. We're not just reactivating a ship. We're relearning a way of warfare that humanity deliberately forgot." "Why did we forget it?" asked Kim. "If these ships were so effective, why abandon them?" Rem's hologram appeared on the bridge, standing near the captain's chair. "Because they were too good at what they did," the AI said softly. "The colonial wars ended with Earth victorious, but at a terrible cost. Entire moons destroyed. Colonies reduced to rubble. Millions dead. When peace finally came, both sides agreed that weapons like this ship should never be used again. But now we need them, Webb said. Now you need us, Rem corrected. And I will teach you everything. How to fire the railguns in sequence to maintain continuous bombardment. How to angle the armor to absorb maximum damage. How to keep fighting when shields fail. When hull breaches occur. When systems go dark one by one. Over the following days, the crew learned. They practiced on simulators that Rem had preserved, running through scenarios from the colonial wars. They learned to think differently, to abandon the elegant tactics of modern warfare in favor of something more brutal. Webb found himself in engineering one night, unable to sleep. The massive fusion reactors hummed around him, old technology but reliable. He was studying a damaged section of bulkhead, preserved as part of the ship's history, when he noticed something. Names carved into the metal. Crew members who had died during Titan, memorialized by their surviving comrades. One name made him freeze. Lieutenant James Webb. Engineering section died hour 61 of the siege. Your ancestor, Rem said. Appearing beside him, he kept the reactors running for 61 hours straight while the ship was under constant fire. When a breach occurred in this section, he sealed it manually from the inside, knowing he couldn't get out in time. His sacrifice allowed us to maintain power for the final assault. Webb traced his fingers over the carved name. 5 centuries separated them, but they shared blood, and now they would share purpose. I never knew, he whispered. Many crew members discovered ancestors in the records, Rem said. This ship was crewed by volunteers from both Earth and the colonies after the war ended. They wanted to remember what they had fought for, and what they had lost. The remembrance became a symbol of reconciliation, and now it becomes a symbol of defiance, the AI replied. The galaxy needs to remember that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. As the 2 weeks passed, the crew transformed. They stopped thinking like modern officers and started thinking like the warriors who had first crewed this vessel. They learned that victory wasn't about having the best technology. It was about refusing to quit when everything said you should. On the final day before departure, Admiral Chen assembled everyone in the main hangar. Behind her, the Remembrance's systems hummed with power, ready for war once more. We leave tomorrow, she announced. The Vraks have broken through at Caldris. The Council's defensive line is collapsing. They still don't know we're coming. Still don't think we can help. We're going to prove them wrong. She paused, looking at each face. This ship was built for a war where defeat meant extinction. That war is happening again, just with different enemies. What we do in the coming days will either save the galaxy or be forgotten as a noble failure. Either way, we fight. The crew stood at attention, understanding finally what it meant to serve aboard the Remembrance. They were no longer just officers in Earth's fleet. They were the inheritors of a legacy written in sacrifice and determination. Lieutenant Webb touched the place where his ancestor's name was carved into the metal, feeling the weight of history and the promise of tomorrow. The old warship was ready. The crew was ready. All that remained was to show the galaxy what human determination truly meant. The Caldris system burned. 3 planets home to billions of Council citizens now stood on the edge of destruction. In the black space above them, 2 fleets clashed in a battle that would decide the fate of dozens of worlds beyond. Admiral Thelsara stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Radiant Dawn, watching her forces slowly lose ground. Her fleet numbered over 2,000 ships, the largest concentration of Council military power ever assembled. Against them, the Vraks had brought 1,500 vessels, each one a nightmare of dark metal and deadly purpose. The western flank is collapsing, reported her tactical officer, a young Krenth whose scales had turned pale with stress. We've lost 40 ships in the last hour. Thelsara watched the display with growing despair. Every strategy she tried, the Vraks countered. Her ships would focus fire on a single enemy vessel, pouring enough energy to vaporize a moon. The Vrak ship would absorb it all, its adaptive armor shifting and adjusting, then return fire with devastating accuracy. Pull the western flank back, she ordered. Reinforce with the reserve squadrons. But there were barely any reserves left. They had been fighting for 6 hours and the Council fleet had lost 300 ships. The Vraks had lost less than 50. At this rate, defeat was not a possibility. It was a certainty. A communication signal appeared on her display. From Earth. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Ambassador Chen," her communications officer announced. "She says a human vessel is approaching the system." Thelsara felt a flash of irritation. "Tell the humans to stay back. We don't have time to protect them." "Admiral, the ambassador says they're here to help. The ship is called the Remembrance, one ship. The humans were sending one ship to a battle involving thousands." Thelsara almost laughed, but she was too tired, too defeated. "Let them come. If they want to die alongside us, that's their choice." The Remembrance dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. On the bridge, Admiral Chen studied the tactical display with Commander Torres at her side. The situation was worse than the reports had indicated. "The Council fleet is breaking," Torres observed. "Another hour, maybe 2, and the Vrax will have complete control of the system." Chen nodded slowly. She had expected this. The Council fought with elegance and precision, trying to minimize casualties and damage. Noble goals, but useless against an enemy that fought with pure, ruthless efficiency. "Take us in," she ordered. "Full speed. Direct course to the center of the Vrax formation." Lieutenant Kim looked up from her navigation station, her eyes wide. "Admiral, that's suicide." "We'll be surrounded." "That's the point," Chen replied calmly. "Rem, broadcast our identification on all frequencies. I want everyone to know we're here." The AI's hologram appeared, nodding. "Broadcasting now. Both Council and Vrax forces will know that Earth has entered the battle." The Remembrance accelerated, its old fusion drives pushing it forward. It was slow compared to modern ships, but it moved with purpose, heading straight toward the thickest concentration of Vrax vessels. On the radiant dawn, Thelsara stared at her display in disbelief. The human ship was moving directly into the center of the enemy fleet, making no attempt to dodge or maneuver. It was the most foolish thing she had ever seen. "What are they doing?" she whispered. Her tactical officer checked the readings. "Admiral, I'm reading massive power signatures from that ship. Thousands of weapons coming online. But they're not energy weapons. They're kinetic? How primitive can they be?" The Remembrance reached weapons range. Immediately, 3 Vrax dreadnoughts turned to engage it. Their weapons lit up space, beams of concentrated energy that could slice through a modern cruiser's shields in seconds. The beams hit the Remembrance and simply stopped. No shields flared, no defensive systems activated. The energy weapons struck the thick armor plating and dispersed, heating the metal but not penetrating it. "Impossible," breathed Thelsara's tactical officer. "That armor shouldn't be able to withstand such firepower." "It's not just armor," Torres explained to his crew aboard the Remembrance. "It's layered composite plating designed specifically to absorb energy weapons. The more they shoot us with lasers and plasma, the less effective it becomes." The Vrax seemed confused by this strange ship that didn't fight like anything they had encountered. They concentrated more firepower, trying to overwhelm it through sheer power. Then the Remembrance returned fire. 5,000 railguns opened up simultaneously. The sound inside the ship was deafening, even through the insulation. Tungsten rounds, each one weighing several tons, accelerated to 3% of the speed of light. They crossed the distance to the Vrax ships in microseconds. The first Vrax dreadnought tried to adapt. Its armor began shifting, adjusting to the incoming threat. But there was nothing to adapt to. The rounds were just metal and velocity. They punched through the dreadnought's hull like paper, tearing through compartments, reactors, crew sections. The ship came apart in a spectacular explosion. The second dreadnought lasted slightly longer. Its armor held against the first salvo, but the Remembrance simply kept firing. The railguns operated in sequence, maintaining a continuous stream of projectiles. Within 30 seconds, the second dreadnought was debris. The third dreadnought tried to retreat, but it was too late. The Remembrance's weapons had a simple philosophy. If one shot doesn't work, fire 1,000 more. The dreadnought's hull was shredded, its interior exposed to space, its crew dead before they could even send a distress signal. Silence fell across the Council communication channels. Every ship, every commander, every crew member had just witnessed something that should have been impossible. An ancient human vessel had destroyed 3 Vrax dreadnoughts in under 2 minutes. "By the ancestors," Thelsara whispered. "What is that ship?" More Vrax vessels turned toward the Remembrance, recognizing it now as the primary threat. 10 ships, then 20, then 50. They surrounded the human vessel, pouring fire into it from all directions. The Remembrance didn't try to escape. It simply stopped moving and became a fortress. Its armor began to glow from the heat of thousands of energy weapons. Sections of hull plating vaporized, but beneath each destroyed layer was another layer and another. The ship had been built with redundancy in mind, and all the while its guns never stopped firing. Lieutenant Webb worked frantically in engineering, rerouting power to compensate for damaged systems. Alarms blared throughout the ship. Hull breach warnings appeared on every screen, but the reactors hummed steadily, feeding power to the weapons. "We're losing armor in sections 4 through 7, reported Kim from her station. "Hull integrity down to 70%. Maintain position," Chen ordered. "All weapons, continuous fire. Target the closest ships first." The bridge shook as another barrage hit them. Sparks flew from a console and a crew member rushed to put out a small fire. But no one left their station. They had trained for this. They knew what this ship was built to do. On the radiant dawn, Thelsera watched the battle with a mixture of horror and awe. The human ship was being torn apart piece by piece, but it was taking dozens of Vrax vessels with it. And more importantly, it had given the Council fleet something they desperately needed: hope. "All ships," she broadcast across the fleet. "Reform in advance. Support the human vessel. If they can stand against the Vrax, so can we." The Council ships, which had been retreating in disorder, suddenly found their courage. They had seen the Remembrance stand alone against impossible odds and refuse to yield. Now they remembered why they fought. The tide of battle began to shift. Council ships moved forward, using the Remembrance as an anchor point. They coordinated their attacks, no longer trying to fight elegantly, but focusing on overwhelming single targets. The Vrax, for the first time in the war, found themselves on the defensive. They had adapted to energy weapons, to missiles, to every sophisticated weapon the Council possessed. But they had no answer for the sheer brutality of the human approach. More Vrax ships died. Their formation began to break apart. The Remembrance continued firing, a fortress of metal and determination surrounded by enemies but unbowed. Aboard the human ship, crew members worked through injuries and exhaustion. The medical bay was overwhelmed with wounded. Life support was failing in 3 sections. Fires burned in compartments that had been sealed off, but the weapons kept firing because the crew kept them firing. Rem's hologram moved through the ship, appearing wherever he was needed, encouraging a damage control team here, helping navigate around a hull breach there. The AI had been built for war, and this was what he knew. "Admiral," Torres reported, his voice strained. "We're down to 60% weapons capacity. Armor is compromised in 17 sections. We can't maintain this much longer." Chen looked at her tactical display. The Vrax fleet was retreating. Not much, not yet, but they were pulling back. For the first time in the entire war, they were the ones withdrawing. "We don't need much longer," she said. "Just long enough to show them that we won't quit." Another explosion rocked the ship. Another system went offline. But the Remembrance stood firm, its ancient guns speaking a language the galaxy had forgotten, the language of absolute determination. In the space around it, the Council fleet rallied. They fought not with desperation now, but with purpose. The human ship had reminded them of something essential. Wars were not won by the side with the best weapons. They were won by the side that refused to lose. The Vrax began to retreat in earnest, pulling their ships back toward the outer system. They had lost over 200 vessels. The Council had lost more, but they had gained something more valuable than ships. They had gained hope. As the Vrax withdrew, Thelsera opened a direct channel to the Remembrance. "Human vessel, this is Admiral Thelsera. Your assistance was unexpected and invaluable. We owe you our gratitude." Chen's face appeared on the screen, covered in soot and exhaustion, but smiling slightly. "We're not done yet, Admiral. The Vrax will regroup and return, but when they do, we'll be ready." She closed the channel and turned to her crew. They were battered, wounded, exhausted, but they had done what everyone said was impossible. They had stood against the Vrax and made them retreat. "Damage report," she ordered. The reports came in and they were not good. But they were alive and the ship was still functional. That was all that mattered. Outside, the Council fleet formed a defensive perimeter around the Remembrance, no longer dismissing the ancient human warship, but honoring it. The first battle was over, but everyone knew that the real test was still to come. The Vrax returned 6 hours later with reinforcements. Their fleet had doubled in size, and this time they came with a plan. They would not make the mistake of underestimating the human ship again. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Remembrance, studying the tactical display. 3,000 enemy vessels were moving into attack formation. Around her ship, the Council fleet had regrouped, but they had lost nearly a third of their strength in the first engagement. The odds were worse now than before. "They're spreading out," observed Commander Torres. "They won't cluster together this time. They're going to surround us from maximum range." Chen nodded. The Vraks had learned. They would stay far enough away that the Remembrance couldn't destroy them quickly, but close enough to slowly tear the ship apart with concentrated fire. It was a sound strategy. "All crew to battle stations," she announced. "This is going to be a long fight." Throughout the ship, crew members moved to their positions. They had spent the last 6 hours making repairs, sealing breaches, and treating the wounded. The medical bay was still full. Engineering was working on damaged systems, but everyone knew their duty. Lieutenant Webb checked the reactor outputs one final time. They were running at 90% efficiency, which was remarkable considering the damage they had taken. His team had worked miracles to keep everything functioning. On one bulkhead, he could still see the names carved into the metal. His ancestor's name among them. The man had died keeping these same reactors running during the siege of Titan. Webb understood now what that meant. It wasn't about glory or victory. It was about doing your job until you couldn't anymore. "Engineering ready," he reported to the bridge. Lieutenant Kim finished her calculations at the navigation station. "Admiral, we're in a bad position. If we try to move, they'll concentrate fire on our engines. If we stay still, they'll surround us completely." "Then we stay still," Chen replied. "We're not here to run. Rem, begin playing the old songs." The AI's hologram appeared, nodding solemnly. A moment later, music began filtering through the ship's communication system. Old Earth songs from the colonial wars. Songs about sacrifice and duty. Songs that the crew of 5 centuries ago had listened to while fighting impossible battles. The Vraks fleet opened fire. From 3,000 ships, weapons lit up the darkness of space. The distance meant that energy weapons lost some effectiveness, but there were so many of them that it didn't matter. The Remembrance was hit by a wall of destructive power. The armor held but barely. Outer layers vaporized instantly. The ship's hull began to glow from the heat. Warning alarms sounded throughout every deck. "Return fire," Chen ordered calmly. "All weapons maximum rate. Target distribution across all enemy vessels." The railguns roared to life once more. 5,000 guns firing in perfect sequence, creating a continuous stream of death. The tungsten rounds reached out across space, traveling faster than any ship could dodge. Vrak ships began to die. The enemy had spread out to minimize damage, but it meant their defensive formations were weaker. The Remembrance's weapons didn't need to destroy ships quickly anymore. They just needed to damage enough of them to reduce the incoming fire. The battle settled into a terrible rhythm. The Vraks fired and the Remembrance absorbed the damage. The Remembrance fired and Vrak ships died or were crippled. It became a question of who would break first. Inside the human ship, conditions deteriorated rapidly. Life support began failing in multiple sections. Crew members worked in suits, breathing their own air supplies. Fires broke out in compartments that couldn't be reached. Damage control teams moved from crisis to crisis, barely keeping ahead of catastrophe. "Hull breach in Section 9, reported a damage control officer. "Sealing now." "Power fluctuation in Reactor 3, called out Webb from engineering. "Compensating with Reactor 4. "Weapons Array 7 is offline," announced the weapons officer. Switching to backup systems. The reports came in constantly, each one marking another system pushed beyond its limits. But the crew responded to each crisis with practiced efficiency. They had trained for this. More than that, they had embraced the philosophy of this ancient ship. Never stop, never yield, never quit. The Council fleet fought alongside them, taking heart from the human vessel's determination. Admiral Thelsara coordinated her forces, using the Remembrance as the center of her defensive formation. The Vraks could not break through without destroying the human ship first, and the human ship refused to be destroyed. Hours passed. The battle became a siege. The Remembrance was no longer a ship but a fortress, holding a position against overwhelming odds. Its armor was failing. Its weapons were down to 40% capacity, but it kept fighting. In the medical bay, doctors and nurses worked on an endless stream of wounded. They had run out of beds and were treating people on the floor. Supplies were running low, but no one complained. Everyone understood what was at stake. Lieutenant Kim worked her navigation console with hands that trembled from exhaustion. She had been at her station for 12 hours straight, making constant micro-adjustments to keep the ship stable as systems failed around her. Beside her station, a screen showed the tactical situation. It was not good. The Vraks had lost nearly 600 ships, but they kept coming. The Remembrance was literally falling apart, piece by piece. "Admiral," she said quietly, "at current damage rates, we have maybe 4 hours before critical systems failure." Chen heard but didn't respond immediately. She was watching something on her display, a change in the Vraks formation. They were pulling back slightly, regrouping. "They're going to try a final assault," Torres observed. "They know we're weakening. They'll throw everything at us at once, try to overwhelm our remaining defenses. Then we'll meet them with everything we have left," Chen replied. She opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the Admiral. The enemy is preparing for a final attack. They believe they can break us. They're wrong." She paused, choosing her words carefully. This ship was built to fight battles that couldn't be won. To stand when retreat was the only logical option. To keep firing when every system said it was impossible. 500 years ago, a crew stood where you stand now and fought for 76 hours straight against impossible odds. They won because they refused to lose. Another pause. "We've been fighting for 18 hours. Our armor is compromised. Our weapons are failing. Our ship is dying, but we are not dead yet. And as long as we live, we fight. That's what this ship means. That's what the name Remembrance stands for. We remember that some things are worth dying for." The crew heard her words and felt something shift inside them. They were exhausted, wounded, pushed beyond anything they had thought possible. But they were crew of the Remembrance now, inheritors of a legacy written in sacrifice. The Vraks fleet charged forward, over 2,000 ships moving in perfect coordination. This was their killing blow, meant to shatter the human vessel once and for all. The Remembrance met them with every weapon it had left. The railguns fired so fast they began to overheat. Engineering pushed the reactors beyond safe limits. Every crew member did their job as if it was the last thing they would ever do. Webb watched his screens as reactor temperatures climbed into the red zone. He could shut them down, save the ship from a catastrophic overload, but that would mean stopping the weapons, and stopping the weapons meant death for everyone. His ancestor had faced the same choice: keep the reactors running or save himself. The answer had been carved into metal 5 centuries ago. Webb kept the power flowing. Explosions rocked the ship. An entire weapons array was torn away, spinning off into space. A hull breach in Section 12 killed 30 people before it could be sealed. The bridge filled with smoke from burning circuits. But the guns kept firing. Vrak ships died by the dozens, then by the hundreds. Their charge broke against the determination of one ancient human warship. They had brought superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. But they hadn't brought superior will. The assault faltered. Ships began pulling back, their commanders unable to comprehend what they were facing. How could one ship so clearly dying still be fighting? How could a crew push themselves beyond physical limits and keep functioning? They didn't understand humanity. They didn't understand what it meant to fight, not because victory was certain, but because surrender was unthinkable. The Vraks fleet broke. Not retreated in good order, but broke. Ships fled in disorder. Their formation shattered, their confidence destroyed. They had thrown everything at the Remembrance, and it still stood. On the bridge, Chen watched them go. Her ship was wrecked. She had lost over 400 crew members. The Remembrance would never fight another battle. But they had won. "All ships cease fire," she ordered. Her voice was hoarse from breathing smoke. "Damage control teams focus on life support and medical. Get the wounded stabilized." She slumped in her chair, suddenly feeling every one of her years. Torres came to stand beside her, his face blackened with soot. "We did it," he said simply. "We survived," Chen corrected. "That's what this ship does. It survives, and it makes sure the enemy remembers it." Outside, the Council fleet held their position, too amazed to pursue the fleeing Vraks. They had watched the Remembrance fight for 20 hours straight, absorbing damage that should have destroyed it 10 times over. They had learned something about warfare that their advanced technology had made them forget. Sometimes the winner wasn't the side with the best weapons. Sometimes it was simply the side that refused to stop fighting. Rem's hologram appeared on the bridge. looking at the battered crew with something like pride. "Well done," the AI said softly. "The crew of old would be proud to call you their inheritors." Webb made his way to the bridge, exhausted but alive. He looked at Admiral Chen and nodded. No words were needed. They had honored the legacy of the ship and those who had served on it before. The battle was over. The Remembrance had won not through superiority, but through sheer bloody-minded determination. And the galaxy would remember. The Remembrance drifted in space, its hull broken and burning. Council ships surrounded it, maintaining a respectful distance. No one needed sensors to see that the ancient warship was dying. Entire sections had been torn away. The armor that had withstood 20 hours of continuous bombardment was now just melted slag in many places. Atmosphere vented from dozens of breaches, creating clouds of frozen vapor around the ship. On the bridge, Admiral Chen sat in her command chair, refusing medical attention even though blood ran down her face from a head wound. Around her, the crew worked to stabilize critical systems. The main reactors were still running somehow, but barely. Life support was failing throughout most of the ship. "Casualty report?" she asked quietly. Commander Torres checked his display, his face grim. 417 dead. 322 wounded. Engineering reports that Lieutenant Webb is among the casualties. Chen closed her eyes for a moment. Webb had kept the reactors running until the very end, pushing them beyond every safety limit. He had died doing his duty just like his ancestor 5 centuries before. "He saved us all," she said. "Make sure that goes in the official record." Lieutenant Marcus Webb died in service aboard the Remembrance, keeping the power flowing when it mattered most. A communication signal appeared on her display. Admiral Thelsara was requesting to speak with her. Chen accepted the call. The Valorn Admiral's face appeared on the screen, and for the first time since Chen had known her, Thelsara looked genuinely humble. "Admiral Chen," Thelsara began, "I must apologize. When you first offered Earth's assistance, I dismissed you. I thought humanity had nothing to offer. I was wrong." "You weren't wrong about our technology," Chen replied. "Our ship is 500 years old. Our weapons are primitive. By every logical measure, we should have been destroyed in the first minutes of combat. Yet you weren't," Thelsara said. "You stood against the Vraks when our most advanced vessels could not. You taught us something we had forgotten. Victory is not about having the best weapons. It's about the refusal to accept defeat." Chen nodded slowly. "That's what this ship was built to teach. That's why we kept it, even after the wars ended, to remember what it cost to survive, and what it takes to win when everything says you should lose." "The Vraks are retreating from 3 systems," Thelsara continued. "For the first time in this war, they're the ones running. Your ship did that. Your crew did that. Our crew," Chen corrected gently. "We're all fighting the same war now." The Council fleet began organizing rescue operations. Medical ships approached the Remembrance carefully, sending teams to help evacuate the wounded. Engineering crews tried to assess the damage, though it quickly became clear that the ship was beyond saving. Rem's hologram appeared throughout the vessel, helping coordinate the evacuation. The AI had maintained core functions despite massive system failures, but even he knew the ship's time was ending. In engineering, rescue teams found Lieutenant Webb's body near the reactor controls. His hands were still on the power regulation panel, frozen in the act of routing power to the weapons. Near him, they found the photograph he had carried, the picture of his ancestor who had died in the same section during the siege of Titan. The rescue team leader, a young Krenth engineer, carefully collected both the photograph and Webb's identification tags. He had heard the stories of the colonial wars, of the human ships that fought with such ferocity. Now he understood what those stories really meant. It wasn't about brutality or primitive weapons. It was about people who believed so deeply in their cause that they would give everything for it. Admiral Chen was one of the last to leave the bridge. She stood in the center of the command room, looking at the stations where her crew had fought so bravely. The ship was silent now, its weapons finally quiet, its reactors beginning their shutdown sequence. "Goodbye, old warrior," she said softly. "You did your duty one last time." Rem appeared beside her, his hologram flickering with power fluctuations. "Admiral, my core systems are failing. I don't have much time left." "You did well, Rem," Chen said. "Your crew would be proud." "Both of them," the AI agreed. "The crew from 500 years ago and the crew from today." They both understood what this ship represents. Not war, but the will to survive it. Chen nodded. Will you be able to transfer your consciousness? Save your memories? No, Rem replied simply. I am tied to this ship. When it dies, I die with it. But that's appropriate, I think. The remembrance was built for one purpose, and that purpose is fulfilled. We showed the galaxy that old lessons are not outdated lessons, that sacrifice and determination still matter. The Admiral saluted the AI, a gesture of respect between warriors. Rem returned the salute, then his hologram flickered and disappeared. A moment later, the lights on the bridge went dark as the ship's main power finally failed. Chen made her way to the evacuation shuttle, the last person to leave the dying vessel. As her shuttle pulled away, she watched through the viewport as the remembrance drifted in darkness, a tomb for those who had died aboard it, and a monument to what they had accomplished. The Council fleet formed an honor guard around the wreck. Thousands of ships from dozens of species arranged in perfect formation, acknowledging the sacrifice of the human vessel. It was a sight that would be recorded in history, the moment when the galaxy remembered what it meant to fight with purpose. 3 months later, the war ended. The Vraks, having learned that the Council could match their determination, sued for peace. Territories were negotiated. Reparations were paid. The Vraks' dominion would remain independent, but they would expand no further. The victory belonged to all the Council species, but everyone knew what had turned the tide. One ancient human warship, refusing to yield, had reminded the galaxy of something essential. 1 year after the battle, a ceremony was held in orbit around Earth. The wreck of the Remembrance had been towed back to its home system, where it would remain as a permanent memorial. But this was not just a funeral. It was also a beginning. Admiral Chen, now retired, stood on the observation deck of Earth's new military academy. The academy had been built in orbit, with a perfect view of the Remembrance floating in the distance. The first class of graduates stood at attention behind her. Not just humans, but representatives from every Council species. You stand here today as the first class of the Galactic Naval Academy, Chen addressed them. You come from different worlds, different cultures, different species. But you share one thing in common. You have all learned the lesson that ship taught us. She gestured toward the wreck of the Remembrance, still bearing its scars of battle. That ship was old. Its technology was primitive. By every modern standard, it should have been useless. But it won because its crew understood something that transcends technology. They understood that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. A young Valorn cadet raised her hand. Admiral, why did you choose to keep the ship here? Why not repair it, or at least clean away the damage? Chen smiled. Because the damage is part of the lesson. Every scar on that hull represents a moment when someone chose to keep fighting. Every burned section is a testament to crew members who did their jobs until they couldn't anymore. We keep it this way so that you, and all who come after you, will remember what real courage looks like. She paused, looking at each young face. Some of you will go on to command the newest, most advanced ships in the galaxy. You'll have weapons and technology that would seem like magic to the crew of the Remembrance. But never forget that all the technology in the universe is useless without the will to use it effectively. Admiral Thel Sarah stepped forward, now serving as an instructor at the academy. The Vraks had superior technology, she added. They had superior numbers. They had won every battle for 3 years. But they lost the war because they encountered something they couldn't adapt to, the human refusal to accept defeat. She looked at the wreck of the Remembrance with visible respect. That ship taught us that wars are not won by the newest weapons. They're won by those who know what they're fighting for and refuse to give up, no matter how bad things look. After the ceremony, Chen walked alone to a memorial wall in the academy. It contained the names of everyone who had died aboard the Remembrance during its final battle. 417 names carved into metal, just like the names from the Siege of Titan that had been preserved aboard the ship. She found Webb's name and placed her hand against it. You did well, Lieutenant. Your ancestor would be proud. We all are. A figure approached from behind. It was the young Krenth engineer who had found Webb's body. He carried something carefully wrapped in cloth. Admiral, he said respectfully, I thought you should have this. He unwrapped the cloth, revealing the photograph Webb had carried. The picture of his great-great-grandfather who had died on the same ship, in the same section, fighting the same kind of impossible battle. It belongs here, the engineer said. "In the place where heroes are remembered." Chen took the photograph and placed it in a display case beside Webb's name. Two warriors from different eras, connected by blood and purpose, both giving everything for what they believed in. Outside the viewport, the remembrance hung in space, bathed in the light of Earth's sun. It would remain there forever, a reminder of what had been and what might be again if ever needed. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Victory was not guaranteed by advanced technology or superior numbers. It belonged to those who refused to quit, who pushed beyond what seemed possible, who remembered that some causes were worth any sacrifice. Chen stood at the viewport, looking at the old warship one final time. "Rest now," she whispered. "Your war is over. But your legacy will live on in every ship, in every crew, in every battle where someone refuses to surrender." The stars shone bright around the wreck of the Remembrance, and in their light the battered hull almost seemed to gleam with pride. The old warrior had fought its last battle, and won not just a single engagement but the future itself. Humanity had joined the galactic community and proven that ancient wisdom still had value. That old ways, old weapons, and old lessons could still change the course of history. The galaxy would remember. It had no choice. The Remembrance had made certain of that,